really need, just so you know what I'm talking about, is just people to help others find their way in. Even if Dr. Fauci comes out tomorrow and says COVID is over, I have a feeling by Easter we'll still be having people nervous, right? I mean, we've had a whole year of this, and it's not going to go away just like that. And I don't think Dr. Fauci is going to say it's over between now and then either. Because of that, we'll still have a lot of safety protocols in place. We'll still have a lot of being careful and extra cleaning. But it's not just that. It's helping people find their way as quick as they can. Some people will come in here, be the first time they've ever been here, and I've had more than one person tell me that our building is confusing. And it's not confusing to me. I've been here for a long time, but one of the first things when we first got here, Mark, who at the time was sixth grade, said, "This church is awesome. There's so many great hiding places," which is not really what you're looking for in a church, but it was, if you're a kid, it was a real advantage, I guess, for him. But to have somebody who knows where all the right places are, to know where the kids' stuff is, to know where the bathrooms are, and just kind of be around and at the doors and be willing to help people find a seat and all that kind of stuff. If you can help with that, all we need is friendly people. And we will help you in a week or two before the service. We'll have a little bit of a training. It'll be very brief, but just to give you some idea of what we're talking about with that. But if you could help out for just at least that Sunday, man, make a big difference. And please let me know if you could do that, or let Julia or Gabe or somebody else know, and or call the church during the week, and we'll try to keep that in mind. We're in the middle of a series. We're going through 1 Peter. And if you're here for the first time, either online or here with us today, it's a good time to be here. You've not missed that much. Not really. The whole book of 1 Peter is talking about being holy. And though we would take that word holy, or a word saint, which means holy one, to only apply to super Christians, the way that Peter uses it, and truthfully the way it's used in the New Testament, seems to be more for just being dedicated, being set apart. Doesn't mean you have it all together. When Paul writes to the Corinthians, he says to the saints in Corinth, and if you read Corinthians, they're a messed up bunch. There was all sorts of sin, stuff we wouldn't have considered doing here yet on a bad day, and it was regular there. And he calls them saints. It wasn't that they had it all taken care of or all put together just right, but they were dedicated. They had made a decision to put Christ first, and they were doing what they could to live that way. And when the word holy is used, that's what it's talking about. And 1 Peter is spending a lot of time talking about being that way, being holy in a broken world. And so we've been talking about that every week, and hopefully as we've been building on, you can see how all of Peter's arguments, it's like lots of different angles of the same diamond, different facets of the same diamond. Hopefully it's just bringing out different aspects of that. Last week, Peter introduced a new idea, and you can look at last week's sermon if you want to, where he talks about being holy in the middle of a hard situation. You know, when you're in a really terrible situation, being holy and dedicated then. And he's kind of continuing that thought this morning. And so I kind of wanted to have our minds on that best we can as we go into it. And we're going to be looking at 1 Peter chapter 3. Maybe before we do it, just in terms of kind of getting our minds all at the same place, I was trying to think about this week who somebody at this sermon could connect with. You know, and I had lots of different ideas, but one idea kept coming back more and more. And imagine if you are and if you are one, it'll be easy to imagine. But imagine that you're a student at a big school or a big university, and a lot of the people that you bounce off of every day, whether it's in high school, the ones that you just go to class with, or in college, where the ones you're in the dorms with or in the apartments with, a lot of people you bounce off of every day, their values and yours are not the same. And you feel that in a lot of ways. Their attitude toward, most of them, it seems like, are drunk at least once a week. Sometimes more often than that. There's a lot more experimentation with drugs than you ever would have considered. It seems like their thinking on sexual stuff is night and day different than what your thinking is. So imagine that's your situation, and you're a student, so you're pretty much stuck in that situation all the time. You can't really ever escape it. And one other wrinkle, everybody's aware of who's who in this scenario. Everybody's aware that you don't participate. Everybody's aware that you're not part of that. And maybe they're gracious about it. Maybe they don't give you grief about it or tease you, but everybody's aware of it. So without meaning to, I mean, you're kind of on the out a lot of times. They'll have conversations that you just aren't part of. They'll have inside jokes that you just don't understand what they mean. You're not going to the same things they're going to. you're not affiliated with the same things they're affiliated with. And sometimes you can feel so alone. You know, sometimes you can feel so alone, like you're the only person who's trying to do this thing. And I thought about that person, and when I was writing this, a lot of what I was wanting to say, I kind of had that person in my head. I don't normally do that, have like one specific thing in my head, but I did. I kept coming back to that thought. The person who is trying to live their faith as genuinely as they can, but it just seems like they're the only one. And I guess that could apply to somebody in an office situation where everybody after the office goes to happy hour together and you're the only one who doesn't. Or if you do go, you don't get as happy as everyone else does. Or maybe it's just the way we live our lives, you know. I mean, a lot of your life might be tied up with other things that they can't communicate with, and they're all, or maybe it's more of a cutthroat office, and everybody's all the time, all we're thinking about is the bottom line and getting ahead, and no, there's no personal anything. It's just about the business, and you just feel like you're speaking a different language than all these people. I mean, you show up and you've got one attitude, and it's like you're the only one who thinks like you think. And you might wonder in those situations if it's really worth going against the current this much. And so that's what this is about, this whole sermon. And like I said, if it's your first Sunday here, in person or online, I'm glad you're here. And hopefully this all makes sense. It was kind of a hard sermon to put together for some reason. It was, I kept changing it all week long, and I think I got it right, but who knows, all right? So we'll do the best we can. It says in 1 Peter chapter 3, first verse I want to focus on, he says, finally, all of you, be like-minded and be sympathetic and love one another and be compassionate and be humble. And all these things that he's talking about here, especially the last few, well, actually all those things, like-minded, sympathetic, love, compassion, humbleness, humility. I mean, all those things are often the kinds of things we say you either have it or you don't. I mean, you can't really fake that. Either you are compassionate or you're not. But Peter seems to think you can fake it, and whether or not you can fake it, he seems to believe you can do it. These are the kinds of things I want you to start doing. And if you're not like-minded now, then get like-minded. It's kind of the attitude that he's having. If you're not humble right now, then get humble right now. I've got a friend who's in the military right now. And I heard a story about him. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from other people's connections. And he says they were going to take the vaccine shot. His group was, and they had the shots, and they were all going to take it, military. And he says, I know that some of you have objections to this, and you're worried that it's safe, and you're worried that that's maybe something you shouldn't do. Get over it, he said. Here's the line. And they're in the military. And that was the end of the discussion. You're under orders, just got to do it. And that seems to be kind of Peter's tone here. Well, I'm not really a humble person. Well, then get humble, Peter says. That last part of it, compassionate and humble, that kind of sticks out to me a little bit. And it reminded me, I'm reading a book by a guy named Dane Ortland, and he talks about Jesus, how Jesus was humble and gentle. And I've been reading that book, and then I saw this verse, and it stuck in me. And I'm not sure it 100% connects, but it connected to me. The verse that this guy Ortland writes about is this one. It's more of a famous verse, maybe one you've heard before. Jesus says, come to me if you're weary or burdened, and I'll give you rest. He says, I'll take my yoke upon you, and yoke is another word for teaching. Take my teaching upon you. Do what I say, basically. And learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, he says, and you'll find rest for your souls. And the book that I'm reading focuses on this part that I highlighted there. I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, right? Learn from me, he says. Take my yoke upon you. Figure it out. In other words, you can be like this too. And Jesus says, if I can separate just that part out, I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart. So let's think about that, because it's an interesting thought, and I want you to get this, because this is who Jesus is, right? And it's good to know who Jesus is and to think about who Jesus is. This is the only place in the New Testament where it talks about Jesus' heart, what Jesus' heart is like. And in the New Testament and the Old Testament, your heart is your passion, right? Some guys have a passion to work with their hands. Some guys have a passion to work with animals. Like, they get out and work with animals, that's the best thing in their whole life. They connect with the animals and they feel like they're at home. Some guys have a passion with numbers. that math and accounting is so easy for them to put that together. Some people's passion is music. And at some level, you can't determine what your passion is. A person who doesn't have a passion for music can still learn music, but you can always tell somebody who really, really loves it. You can always tell somebody who really, really cares. And it's not just that with music, it's with anything. I mean, some guys are woodworkers, but some guys have a passion. They have a heart for woodworking. I mean, they love the smell of the wood. They love analyzing the different finishes that can go on it and how that brings out different parts of it. I mean, they think about it. They live and breathe it. They're at home in the shop, right? Well, Jesus says, "I'm gentle and humble in heart." This is my passion. This is the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. Jesus says. So it's worth thinking about that. That word "gentle" can also be translated compassionate or sympathetic. You're not quick to react. I mean, you want the other person to succeed. You're looking for them to do great things before yourself. You've got a heart for them. You want the best for other people. And this humble word is the word like lowly, coming in small, and where you're not trying to throw it over people. You're on purpose, kind of backing off a little bit. You're willing to let other people lead. Okay, and Jesus says that's how I am. That's my heart. And it's kind of a confusing thing in a way, because Jesus, there was a movie a few years ago called Bruce Almighty, and the plot of Bruce Almighty, if you've not seen it, is what would it be like if Jim Carrey was God? That was the plot of Bruce Almighty. And it's worth seeing if you've not seen it. It's kind of a funny movie. But when Jim Carrey has all the power of God, it turns out that most of what he does is selfish. And truthfully, if you had all the power of God, at least for your first few weeks, I'm guessing that's what you'd do, right? You'd have a bigger house, or maybe a better vacation, or if you hurt, those of you who have a bad back or a bad knee, I mean, that'd be gone, right? I mean, as soon as you had all the power of God, that'd be the first thing to go. Some of you might de-age yourself a little bit, make yourself look younger, or make yourself look more fit. Some of you might want to be rich. Maybe money has been a constant struggle for you, and if you had all the power of God, one of the first things you'd do is make sure that you had all the money you could use. And you're not alone in that, if that's what you would do. I mean, it's what a lot of us would do. If I had all the power of God, first thing I would do is get ahead. I'd make myself more somehow. I had somebody tell me a few years ago they were looking for a house. I said, "What kind of house are you looking for?" "Looking for a no-maintenance house." So maybe if you had all the power of God, that'd be the first thing you'd do. I'd build myself a no-maintenance house. Jesus says, "I have all the power of God, and my heart's for you." I just think that's instructive. I think that's instructive. I think that's powerful. I think that means something. Jesus says, "I have all the power of God, and I just want you to, I'm for you." And I have to confess, thinking about Jesus that way has been kind of eye-opening to me this week. And I know that he's for me. It's not that. And I want to talk about this more later. I don't want to stay on this too long. But it's just a compelling thought, right? That Jesus, who could do anything and be anything and have anything, his heart, what gets him out of bed in the morning is you succeeding. It's you becoming who you're supposed to be. That's what fires his imagination. Well, and again, taking that idea, because I've been reading about that, back to this verse in Peter. Peter says, "Finally, I want you to be like-minded, sympathetic, love each other, compassionate, humble." All those things are like Jesus, right? I want you to be like Jesus. I want you to be gentle and humble in heart. I want this to become your passion. And it's not saying that you can't do some of those other things. It's good to get in shape. It's good to make a little money. If you can find that no-maintenance house, God bless you. You go buy that and let me know how you did it. But it's not the main thing. And honestly, if Jesus is the one who made it all, if it's God's world, if it's all his design, if it's his idea, and one day we'll all be with him again, then life only is going to make sense if you run in his direction. And this is his direction. And then he goes on, same section, 1 Peter. He says, "And don't repay evil with evil, or insult with insult, he says, but with blessing, because to this you were called. And again, that's that military word. You were drafted, right? I mean, you were chosen, and you agreed, and you signed on the dotted line. And so, you don't get to choose anymore which of these things you're going to do or not do. Again, another friend I have in the military signed up and signed all the dotted lines and got his clothes for his they gave him his clothes and where he's going to go, and he's walking through the hall to where he's supposed to be, and the guy stops him and says, "Hey, it says here you've not had your wisdom teeth out." He goes, "No, they've always been good." "Great, that door. It's not up to you anymore. You signed on the dotted line. And to this you've been called." So this is compelling too, and I want you to think through it just a second because it's instructive. When I think about the people, think about in your head here real fast, is there anybody who over the last couple months, last year, I don't know, has there ever been anybody that you said, I just don't like them? Maybe you and your husband or wife were talking, or you and your friend, and I just don't like them. I just don't care for them. I don't really like hanging out with them. I just don't like them. And you said it, and it was the kind of thing that you don't say very often. I mean, it's like you got a whole list of people you don't like, but it just kind of came out. I just don't like them very much. Or maybe you didn't say it, but you think it. Every time I see them, I just don't like them very much. And what I started thinking about that, most of the time, the people that I just don't like very much, if I'm being honest, I don't like them because I don't think they like me. I think they look down their nose at me. Or I think they talk about me when I'm not there. Or I think they're arrogant, and they take advantage of people, take advantage of me. Most of the time when I don't like somebody, the reason I don't like them is because I don't think they like me. Well, Peter's saying, I want you to go a different direction here. When somebody is evil to you, you don't respond with evil. You turn the other cheek. Now, just like last week, if I can speak honestly to you here, and again, to online, and the online actually scares me more than talking to you guys, because I have no idea who I'm talking to online. I want to say that he's not talking about every evil here. He's not talking about every evil. If there's a wife and she's being beaten by her husband, she should leave. She should leave. She shouldn't just put up with that. Return it with blessing. If a child is being abused, they should tell someone. The police should get involved. And they're not wrong to get the police involved. Peter's clearly not talking about every possible evil in the whole world, that the right thing to do is just to go along with it. I think he's talking about the day-to-day stuff, how we bump into each other, how we take advantage, the little irritations we do to each other. Don't return that. And some of the big stuff. Sometimes the person who has a little power over your life does snap the whip, and they do it to be mean, and they're doing it to be hateful, and they're doing it, and they're smirking at you while they do it. And I know that's aggravating. I know that's frustrating. And you got every right in the world to give it right back to them. But Jesus said, and now Peter in this verse is saying, don't do that. You were called to something else. And he gives you the motivation for it. He quotes, I got it in italics because Peter, in 1 Peter 3, he's quoting Psalm 34. He says, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Right? Peter's motivation for being kind, even when people are hard to you, Peter's motivation for being strong, even when people are trying to knock you down, is that God's watching. God's watching. And the hint of this verse here is that God's going to reward you one day if you do the right thing. And I know when I'm saying that to some people, that sounds like a fairy tale, and that it'll all just work out in the end. And I appreciate that. Let me at first mention, I appreciate that it sounds like a fairy tale. And I know it sounds like it's too good to be true, but I think a conviction that I have, I think we all sort of know that that's true. I even have the conviction that some people who are far, far from God even suspect that it's true. You might talk to somebody who's far from God and they don't believe in God at all. And yet if they have a little string of bad luck, they'll start doing superstitious things to try to get on the right side of whatever's going on. They may not believe it's God, but they have 2 or 3 bad things happen to them, and okay, I got to start changing something. You know, sports guys might do that. If they go on a little winning streak and they've won 2 or 3 or 4 games in a row, suddenly, I don't want to change these socks, or I want to make sure I wear the same headband or whatever else because I don't know what I'm doing right, but I don't want to mess anything up. And there's this sense that people, even who are far away from God, have that there's something in this world that rewards the right thing and it punishes the bad thing. Some religions call that karma. In Christianity, we don't use that phrasing, karma, because we believe that ultimately the cross means you won't get what you deserve, but you'll get God if you reach out towards Him. But that notion. G.K. Chesterton wrote a book a long time ago called Orthodoxy, and in the book he talks about fairy tales. There's a whole chapter on it, and it's really smart. And he talks about that the fairy tales are basically democracy in action. People say they believe in democracy. Well, the fairy tales are democracy. The fairy tales are the whole village tells the story. And they tell it, and they tell it, and they tell it, and they tell it because there's elements of it that are true, and there's elements of it that they want their kids to know. It's democracy. Everybody agrees on it. If you go get an expert's opinion, whatever the expert's opinion is, it's just one guy wrote that book. But a fairy tale is what thousands of people, millions of people have believed through the years. Jack and the Beanstalk is about Jack killing the giant because we know that giants take advantage of smaller people. And giants sometimes need to be knocked down because they're cruel. Well, you look at Cinderella and we see that the servant girl one day will become a princess. And we don't know how that's going to happen, but that there's some power out there, some Godfather, Godmother out there that's going to make that happen. We just know it. Beauty and the Beast has that sort of an element that something has to be loved before it can become lovable. And people would tell these stories to each other because it's the truth. And we didn't know how to say it exactly, but we all knew it. That's what this verse is. But what Peter's saying is it's God behind all that. I mean, it's God that's watching us when we do right. It's God that's watching us when we do wrong. It's God that's trying to pull us someplace. And he ultimately is going to pull us someplace. So Peter's whole deal is, man, stay focused. Be sympathetic, be gentle, be humble. Even when evil hits you, don't always respond with evil. You've been called to something bigger. One more verse here. He says in 1 Peter 3, this is the next verse in 1 Peter, in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. In your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Now, we've already talked about heart, right? Your heart is your passion. For Jesus, his heart was to be gentle and humble, and your heart, you want to be like Christ. So in your hearts, have a passion for the things that are most important. Doesn't mean the other passions are bad, but make sure you have a passion for that thing that is most important. Put Christ as Lord. And always be prepared, he says, to give an answer to somebody who asks you for the hope that you have. You know, what is it that makes you tick? Because just like that thing I told you at the very beginning of the sermon, the kid who feels like everybody's going the other direction, they notice that you're not. They don't know why you're not. So you always be ready to talk about that thing. You always be ready to share with them what it is that makes you tick, because this world that we live in is sick, and it needs to know. We live in a broken world, and most people aren't aware of the things that you're aware of, and they don't know. So you always be ready to share what you know. And you always be ready to share this hope that you have in Christ. I have a friend, and when he was a younger man, he drank a lot. He might have been an alcoholic. I know there's different ways to define what that is, and I'm not sure if he would call himself one or not, but I think he would admit that it was up for debate whether or not he was an alcoholic. And when he became a Christian, when he really got serious about this thing, that was the end of it. Now, I'm not saying he never slipped at all, but that was the end of it. He made a decision he's going to be different. For him, the alcohol was powerfully dangerous, and he wasn't going to do that anymore. He still had to travel a lot for work, and some of the places where he traveled for work and did the different things that he did, people had gotten used to seeing him in the bar. In fact, a lot of the meetings probably were in the bar. And when he would go with 2 or 3 other guys, they'd go to the bar first thing. And he's not doing that anymore. He might go with them to sit there with them, but he's not going to drink, and he might not even go with them because of the temptation of it. And so he's going on this trip, and they're going to California. It's for work, and they're going to California, and he's with 2 or 3 guys that he has traveled with before and used to really get hammered with before, but he's trying to be a different man. And they get to California, and they invite him to go with them to the bar, and he goes, hey, I'm different than that now. I can't do that anymore. I'm a Christian. And their answer was, we're a long way from Indiana. In other words, God can't see you here in California. I lived in California, and I think God can even see out there. And maybe your church won't know what you're doing out there. And maybe your husband or wife or your kids won't see what you're doing when you're there, but God sees. And God knows. And in that situation, man, those guys need to know that God sees. And God knows. And it's not the right time for a big sermon. I wouldn't have encouraged my friend to preach to him about the evils of alcohol in that moment. I mean, it's not the right time to just rail at him. But, man, a quiet witness, that I love Jesus even in California. I just can't do it. Is a powerful, powerful thing. Now, it won't have the effect of making you their friend. I should mention that. And it might have the effect, almost certainly will have the effect of further isolating you if you feel a little isolated. And for some people, that's such a painful thing, they can't even imagine doing it. But it's what our world needs. We need people to step up and be saints. And that doesn't mean you've got it all together. I'm not asking for that. Nobody has it all together. And it doesn't mean that you can't admit your weaknesses. It just means that you make a decision that I'm going to walk different. I want to be where he is. I want to go where he goes. I want his heart. As I get older, I'm more convinced than ever, and that's the whole thing. I do funerals for people who have lots of money but no friends. I do funerals for people who at the end of their life, they're just not deeply connected to anybody. Not really. Talking to sons or daughters of somebody in the casket, and I never really knew him. And I don't want that. I want his heart. I want to have the kind of heart that when it is my time to close my eyes in this life, like it is certainly going to be one day, that I have great confidence because I've lived my life the right way. That I followed Jesus, that I believe that he came out of the grave, and because I believe that he came out of the grave, he's going to bring me out of the grave. And I couldn't even dream of running against what he wants. I want to always be prepared to talk about that. And not to preach a whole sermon at somebody, as I might be wont to do, but just to tell them, man, he's changing me. And I don't have it all figured out yet, but I wouldn't dream of going back to that old way of life. I think our country needs to hear that sort of thing more than ever. If Jesus is leading us, where is he leading us? And I think it's to reach out to others. At some level, this goes against what you'd think. If I see somebody who is really, really, really fit, I mean, no body fat at all, and they're in the gym a couple times a day, and they don't eat anything but tuna and red meat, and they're in shape, and they see somebody who has a lot more weight, they might be judgmental of that. How can you eat that poison? You big slob, you big slug. Or you see somebody who's really, really smart. Boy, they're so smart. They're just way up in front of everybody else. And they might see somebody who's not as smart and take shots at them, like they're a dummy or they're slow or they're stupid. You see somebody who's really rich, and they might do lots of little things to let you know that you don't have as much as they have. Maybe they even look down on you a little if you don't have what they've got. Maybe you felt some of that sometime. Or maybe if it's somebody who, like on a sports team, the best athlete on the team, anytime the worst guys on the team miss a shot or what's your problem? Can't you do this? And the answer is no, they can't do it. They're not as talented as you. That's how the world works. So we would assume that Jesus, who's completely holy, kind of looks down on us. He saved us, but he kind of looked down on us because he's so perfect and we're not, that he kind of puts up with us. Again, Dane Ortland said, it's kind of like we look at Jesus like we would look at a kid touching a snail for the first time. And he pulls his hand off. That's how Jesus is with us. And Ortland said, that's why we need the Bible, because the Bible tells us that he's gentle and he's humble in heart and he's for you. And he's watching what you do, but he's not watching with a score sheet hoping to knock you down. He's hoping to build you up. Our country's in a weird moment. 2020, with all the isolation and all the craziness that went on, it's upheaval for a lot of churches. Some of the people who left the church last March won't come back. They don't miss it that much. It didn't really affect their lives. Not really. Not too much. And I hate that, but that's the world, right? And I don't know what the result of all this time is going to be. I think we're going to see ripple effects from our last year for several years in social stuff and education and health, in some of the relationship breakdowns. And it's not just that. It's just, I find myself, I don't think we're getting persecuted right now. Certainly not compared to China or Cuba or other places. I don't think we're getting persecuted. I know there are some people in bigger pulpits than mine who say we absolutely are getting persecuted, and as Christians we need to fight all the time. And I want us as Christians to be alert all the time, always be prepared to give an answer all the time, but I don't think we're getting persecuted. But I do see dominoes falling. And I'm not as confident as I used to be that there won't come a day when we'll be persecuted, that there won't come a day when being a Christian might be tricky legally. And I could pick on any number of different things to illustrate that, but I noticed a USA Today article this week. 1 out of 6 in Generation Z, and that's age 24 and down, 1 out of every 6 identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transsexual. 1 out of 6. It's much higher than any other generation previously, right? The thinking before had been 5% or less. It would be the total, and 5% is roughly the whole nation would identify that way. But with Generation Z, it's 1 in 6, and it's a curious thing. And I don't want to analyze it real hard, but it makes me ask a couple of questions. And one of the questions is, I thought all of this stuff we were told was genetically caused, that all of this stuff was how you were born. And it seems like if it's how you were born, it'd be a real static line. It wouldn't ever increase. You either are or you aren't. I've read people say, why would anybody choose that life with all the hate you get if you choose that life? And that nobody would choose it. And so you would expect if it's genetic and nobody would choose it, that number would never go up. But it is going up. It's going up so much that USA Today says their headline, "Society is Changing." I don't know how you make sense of that if you don't have a Christian worldview. Now, in a Christian worldview, we know that the pressure from other people can make us do stupid things. And that sometimes the pressure from the world we live in can squeeze us into its mold. Sometimes the pressure of this world can make us an entirely different person than maybe we would like to be. But if you just believe in genetics, I don't know how you make sense of something like that. But what it makes me think, and again, I could have picked any number of different stories on any number of different issues. What it makes me think is that we need the church more than ever to just stand up and say there's another way. There's another way. You don't have to go this direction. And I know sometimes that's going to be a lonely path, but it's what we're called to. To let people know that while this whole world is sliding, there is a fixed point that you can aim at, and that God is for you, and that any one of you can run back to God at any time. I don't know, Ben can come back up. I don't know what that does to any one of you, or what that makes you think, or what that makes you process through, but I have a couple of things I want you to pray about. Certainly, if you know somebody who is far from God, I want you to commit today to start praying for that person. I want you to commit today to start lifting them up in prayer. Easter is coming. You know what Thomas said earlier. Your batting average goes way up on Easter in terms of getting somebody to come here to church and to talk to them about these things. Maybe think about that. But whether or not you bring them here or whether or not you bring them here on Easter, I want you to start praying that the opportunity will come for you to give an answer, for you to say what it is that you believe, and maybe to help them understand what it is that you believe. I want you to start praying about that. If you want someone else to pray about it, we've got guys in the front who will pray with you, and you don't have to tell them exactly who your friend is. You can just say, I've got a friend, I want to pray for them, and they'll pray for that. Or you can say the first name, here's their first name, or tell them who they are. I mean, we're not gossiping about this thing. We want to pray for people. That's positive, right? And so that's the first thing. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about, too, for you personally, if you found yourself kind of caught in your passions aren't taking you the right direction, and you don't feel very close to God, man, take advantage of this moment, this day, to get back with God. Take advantage of this time, of this moment. He's for you. And ask God to invest in you again. Take down those walls that you've kept to keep God away and bring him back in. God says, I come to you humble and gentle, and he will come to you if you ask him to. And so, again, we have opportunity for prayer up here in the front. Come and pray, and they can help you walk through, even if what you need to walk through is, I need to get right with God for the first time. They can help you figure that out and what you need to do next, and at least you'll have somebody in your corner praying for you as you leave this place. So take advantage of all that if you don't mind. Won't you stand up?